After I finished up with my character sketch, it was time to move on to 3D modeling. I brought that same sketch into Maya just to have in the background and sort of line up and make sure the proportions were kind of right, remind myself what it was supposed to look like. I'm using the sort of box model approach where everything just starts off as a cube, just set something down, try to get the shape of his chest into place, decide. Making low level decisions early like this has a really it makes saves you a lot of work later on. Right now there's only 30 odd vertices for me to adjust and sort of decide where the shoulders are going to be. Same with the legs. They're just cylinders now, but as I go, I can add divisions and sort of begin to put in the places where bumps are going to be for the knees. This guy's got kind of a weird pelvis. His legs are so thin that I decided the way it was going to meet up with his body is there would just be this butt at the top of his legs, and that was going to disappear under his shirt. Hopefully nobody stares up his skirt enough to notice that things are not very neat under there. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why would your stomach be hanging out over your legs? Anyway, who knows? Maybe somebody looks like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Moving on to the head now, and I redid this head a lot of times, so which is pretty important for me. I think I've never really made a head in one pass. I make it and then remake it and then remake it and make another one on top of that. As you can see, I already got frustrated really quickly and moved on to his arms. The weird thing about this guy's arms is that he's got this really thick shirt sleeve, which I think I originally intended to be like a pirate sleeve, like a big puffy sleeve, and it ends up just looking like his biceps. So that's what I'm going with now. Actually, it was his biceps the whole time. I had to look at references of dresses to try and figure out how that might work. This was another tough thing for me to decide is how his posture was going to work, where his legs were going to be, and I decided that his legs should be forward, sort of so that almost like his legs are leaning forward, but his torso is leaning backward. And then I thought I need to extend his butt to make that work. This is a pretty simple character, so I didn't I didn't design different pieces for the shirt. There are little flares at the end of his sleeves. Those are just extruded out from where his sleeves end and connect right into his elbow. I wasn't too worried about defining the transition there. And once I knew that his arms were the right length, I put him down at his side to make the shoulder make more sense. As I was working on it, make the armpit make more sense. This isn't a character that's designed to be really acrobatic and flexible, so I'm not very good at rigging the arm to move up anyway, so I just model him in a position where his arms are not all the way down at his sides, but not full T pose either, and they end up being at sort of a 45-degree angle. Getting ready for the hands is one of the more exciting parts of this. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm always trying to make really stylized hands, and I don't like doing hands the same way two times. So this time I went with this weird kind of knuckle that introduces a quad. It kind of like extrudes each section of the finger down, but then the geometry bends back up, so it's still roughly straight. Another thing I wanted to try out with this project was doing not a full hand of fingers, not all five. The thumb and the pointer finger are separate, but the rest of them are sort of merged into this glove. You see that a lot in older games that didn't have so much graphic fidelity, and I wanted to try that out, see if I could make it work, if it would look half decent, or if it would just suck. And it turns out it sucked, and nobody's really happy with it, even me. But it was a learning experience. I feel like I could make it work if I really wanted to put some time into it, but I don't think it really worked for this project. The thumb is, of course, just a duped finger that's all short and stubby. Stupid thumbs. It's like, go be a real finger. You know, why do you think everybody's opposed to you? It's because no one likes you. Figuring out where the thumb fits into the hand is always kind of weird. It's not, it doesn't line up with the other fingers. It kind of goes, it's a different angle off the hand. It's kind of part of the palm is the first section of the thumb, which I never really understood. And I keep staring at my hands trying to figure it out, but it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. I don't worry about it too much. If you can get it on there and get the geometry so that it's roughly roughly flows normally, nothing looks too weird, then I'm not going to worry about it. Sometimes I tap on the smooth preview as I'm working just to sort of see, helps me see the more general shape, you know, prevents you from getting too lost at just staring at what the actual geometry is. So now I'm so far done with the other parts of his body that I have to come back to the head and figure out how to make his face work, which, you know, spoiler alert, this is all getting trashed in a while. So this is a struggle for me every time I come back to the face, trying to understand how facial geometry works. And I think it doesn't help that this is a cartoon character, and I pretty much go at the problem assuming that the solution won't be normal, that he's going to have such strange anatomy that I shouldn't even go for a normal face topology. And once I realize that is when I tend to bring in other shapes and start to try to understand why those shapes are the way they are. Again, I get too frustrated, so I just start making a helmet and trying to figure out ways to distract myself. I decided the thing that wasn't coming through must be something to do with the chin, but screw that, moving on to the shoe. Don't have time for any of this face stuff. His shoes are also really cartoony. This is a area I never felt like going into great detail. I don't know who's looking too closely at the shoes. Cartoon characters never have real shoes anyway. They're sort of just simple shapes. I mean, every part of him is just simple shapes, and why should the shoes be any different? They have to articulate. They have some pieces added on just to make sure that everything makes sense. But for the most part, it's just this kind of weird half cone, which I think gets the job done. Somehow, I need this to evoke the idea of a shoe in armor. I don't know if anybody actually knows what a shoe in armor looks like, so I'm just gonna pretend that they don't and make it up. It's easier. My whole job is a lot easier if I can just pretend that nobody knows anything and that it's all made up. It is all made up. Haha. It's a cartoon, so I don't care what it looks like. It just has to be a block at the end of his leg. That is good enough for me. Shoes take a long time. Shoes take a long time, and I'm still on the first part of his shoe. Like I said, I decided to put it into a couple of pieces. Was sort of trying to figure out, is this a boot? Does this go up his leg? But I was concerned with how that would rig, so I decided to do it as a few pieces, sort of like there's a cuff that goes around his ankle and kind of covers up the top part of his shoe, and that the piece at the front of that is separate so that it could move separately. These ended up, I don't know if they're made out of metal. They're skinned in the final version, so they deform, which is not something metal would do, but I'm not too concerned about that. Like I said, I think these are sort of smaller details that maybe I obsessed a little too much over. It's something that I doubt anybody would be looking too closely at. But at this point, I'm pretty much stalling, trying to spend as much time as possible finalizing this crap before going back to the face, because I really don't understand how to make that face work, and I basically can't figure out faces until I'm forced to, so as long as there's something else for me to do, I just spend my energy on that. The cylinder knee is a bit of a placeholder, and now I'm going back and making the topology make a little bit more sense. Hopefully this will help it deform better when the knee is bending. So there's more geometry on the front, which means if the calf rotates back, then the knee should be able to maintain its roundness. He doesn't actually have feet in the shoes, just these weird sort of lumps. Improve some of the shapes on the calves, but then I've got nothing left to do and I have to come back to the head. So here the struggle begins. I have to open up MS Paint to try and understand what a face is. And the weird thing about this guy's face is he has sort of an underbite, kind of this giant jaw and chin that are a continuous piece. And a big part of my struggle was understanding how that piece fits into the whole head. Does the plane of his face come down and disappear into it? One thing that helped was sort of combining the brow and the nose in this way, I think, so that the nose pretty much comes down like an extension of the forehead. And I know that this is all going to be under the helmet, so I don't care a ton about what it looks like. My Google reference for this was people with an underbite, which doesn't really doesn't give you the same idea in a cartoon as it does in real life. It is a condition that people have, but I think in a cartoon it sort of just makes a big masculine jaw. That's the idea I was going for. So here's the best way to scrap your work is to try and draw over it with quad draw like this or whatever topology drawing tool your software uses. And I decided that part of what was holding me back is I wasn't really getting that line that comes down between the corner of the nose and the corner of the mouth, the sort of laugh crease. I decided if I can draw that out and I can get that to fit in with the topology, then maybe this will start actually looking like a face and not like a mutant statue. I don't know if I actually succeeded. It might still just be a mutant statue. But this, I feel like it's starting to get there. I'm starting to understand what the shapes of the face are supposed to be like, and it really was mostly just about bringing that bottom half of his face, making it jut out in sort of a Neanderthal-like way. Another way that this dude sort of has primitive features is that his eye is almost recessed, and actually his eye kind of comes down out of his brow in a way that I'm not sure if eyes really work that way. I don't really know what humans are supposed to be like. I'm just pretending to be one of you. I've got one last opportunity to distract myself from the face. I decided to go ahead and work on the helmet, even though I was trying to save most of the pieces of clothing for the next part of the project, but his shoes are where his feet are and his helmet is where his head is, so I can justify those as being part of his body. It's not like I have his head extensively modeled under the helmet. It's all just bald. So the one constraint on the helmet is that this visor piece has to rotate around that point and actually make it back over the top of the helmet. So I tried to include some geometric precision there. And I didn't worry too much about the topology on these pieces. I knew that they were going to be very simple and hard. So, I mean hard in the sense of rigid, not hard in the sense of difficult. I knew that they were going to be these solid bits. So I wasn't too worried about making the edges particularly elegant. And once I've done about as much with that as I can, I'm forced to go back to the head, and somehow, I don't know when it happened, but his head started looking like a head. Actually, I think I'm missing some footage, so I guess I'll keep that little secret to myself. I'm sure whatever the solution was, it is so elegant that I will go back and find the clip and make sure that everybody gets to see the product of my genius. Or maybe I just cheated and hired somebody else to do that part, and now I'm hiding the evidence. Well, however I did it, I've got a head now, and I'm going through the final step of bridging all of these pieces together. I think the hands and arms and torso are already together. And another struggle here, in the same way that trying to understand how the legs fit into the body, is now I needed to figure out how the neck fit into the head. I guess I'm still trying to figure out how the legs fit into the body also. Uh, for one thing, having enough topology for that to work, and also just how they're positioned, how they're going to physically interact with each other, and what silhouette that provides. I'm doing with the elbow what I did with the knee, just extruding it, making the edge flow work differently so that there is geometry going around the outside of the elbow to keep its shape when it bends, and also modeling a bend into the arm to make rigging easier so that I'll be able to define the orientation of the joint when his arm bends. That's another thing I don't really quite understand about humans, is how arms work. They bend, but they also twist, and there's like a weird volume preservation thing going on. Here's what I meant about the neck, is I couldn't, in a human, the spine pretty much goes straight up the back of the skull, and that wasn't really working for this character. I ended up deciding that the neck needed to go out into the middle of the head, and there was kind of like a dip at the bottom of the skull. I don't know, maybe people have that. I can't really look at myself to check, so I'm just going to assume actually that that's probably anatomically perfect and nothing that I do is ever wrong. This is another part of the simplicity of his clothing, is it just sort of extrudes inward to make his chest with that really deep V-neck. Wow, that is a deep V-neck. I didn't really think about how much of his chest was shown before. It's not quite Jennifer Lopez levels of scandalous, but it's pretty sexy. Maybe a little too sexy for this cartoonish style. And as things are wrapping up, it's no fun looking at gray all the time, so I went ahead and threw some really quick colors on everything just to help me appreciate the work I had done. Some really desaturated, boring colors.